more money for fancier bowls, chairs, and cutlery. And then the owner, in another interview in another restaurant, will corroborate this by saying, well, one time I tried to get nicer plates and my customers didn't like it, so I switched back to the boring plates. Or I tried to improve my place and I charged 15 cents more and then I lost my customers. So most of this actually is quite easy to corroborate because I'm working at the two sides of the value chain. I'm looking at the server and also at the customer. So that was actually, from the perspective of a researcher, a very nice result. That instead of having to draw conclusions only from the word of let's say, a customer, I can also usually corroborate this with somebody else. And of course, the survey data was an important part of corroborating these stories. But yeah, there's hundreds of interviews and they've all been decoded and analyzed. But for a presentation like this, I can only give you a few snippets like this. But this is what I would take out of this, and this type of narrative would appear a lot, in many interviews. But I just chose one that's very easy to understand. Other people would mention it in more vernacular ways. I don't know if that's sufficient answer, but behind this is a lot of decoded interviews using a social science research software. And if you want, we can talk about that later. Okay, there's one question back there. Well, Kaichu? No? Oh, okay, sorry. So you were next. You had a question before? No? All right. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Han, for such a great talk today. I just want to add a thought question about how you cluster the customer socio-economic status since they have two different clusters, the poor, the middle class, and the upper and the rich. How do you cluster and come up with a series of these indicators to cluster these different levels?
So, of the 120 people who I interviewed, most of them were at restaurants. But there's also, in order not to have a very strong bias, because if you interview somebody in a restaurant, that suggests that person goes to restaurants. So I didn't want that bias to be there, so I also interviewed people who don't go to restaurants or who weren't at a restaurant. And in that case, I would interview people who were, for example, at a snack bar, or people who were just buying vegetables in the market when I was there, and I would ask them about their behavior as well. And so they are included in these aggregates as well. Now, how do I determine categories like socioeconomic class? And that's a really good question. I've had quite a bit of experience measuring socioeconomic class, for example, in the countryside. It's more complicated in the city, I won't lie. And so it's very possible that some of my categories are not perfect. But usually, if you're at a restaurant, for example, you can see what kind of mode of transportation the person arrives in. And I'm very sensitive, I know very precisely if it's a sangre, or if it's like a really nice scoopy, you can tell relatively how much money they have. And also I asked them directly what their employment was. And now, if somebody tells me they work in an office, I can also find out if it's a bank or is it a secretarial job. And so I can cross-reference what they drive, how they're dressed, to their job. And you can also sometimes ask the owner afterward, because the owner knows many of the people. So if I'm really confused, I can say, that guy who just left, what does he do really? Is he well off? Is he okay? And they'll say, oh yeah, he's so rich, or his farm is not doing very well, or he lost his land. There's many ways of cross-referencing that, but I'll tell you that with the category of socioeconomic class, I worked very, very hard to make sure that was as accurate as possible. Yeah?
I've got so many questions there. Okay, I'll do two first. So one is I'm looking at your definition of local for the market.
Can you slow down? I can't
Okay, but the definition of local when you enter the market, particularly with vegetables. Where are the soup pot owners looking for Khmer vegetables? Or there's so many Vietnamese vegetables here. I'll just go with that.
Okay, so most of the cases, these are small-scale soup pot restaurants. So the owner would go at 4:30 in the morning to the closest wet market and buy almost everything there, with the exception of some things that were either left over or some things that they stockpile because they can keep for a long time, like potatoes or onions. They may not get those every time. But generally what they will do is they will come to the market with an idea in their head. And the idea is, okay, this last week I made these dishes, so now I have to make something different. So they're thinking, I need to find different ingredients and make different food. But sometimes, and these were the moments where the researcher really, sort of, enjoys his work. You see the owner come into a market and say, oh my God, they have my favorite type of eggplant. And then I'm going to make this food. And they're inspired by what they see in the market, some type of local produce that has just come out of the field. And that causes them to change their original plan about what to cook that day. And I would say that happened about 25% of the time. They are inspired by the market. But these are soup pot restaurant people who normally go every day, so they know what's in season, what's coming in season, so they're not surprised very much. But 1 out of 4 times, they change their idea based on what's in the market. Sometimes they'll say, the beef quality is very low today, I'm not going to do a beef dish. And they will change everything over to pork, or they'll move it to fish, or something like that. Now, in order to find out whether something is seasonal or local, now, seasonality, of course, in the tropics is tricky because there's only some things that are really seasonal. But that's what I pointed out, for example, fish is seasonal, and certain types of vegetables and fruit are very seasonal. Other things also they come in cycles. There are periods where you will never be able to find Cambodian tomatoes, and then for an entire month, they're the cheapest tomato in the whole lot, and the Vietnamese tomatoes cannot compete. And I would say this is not seasonality in terms of climate, but it's seasonality for the market. And the soup pot people are very sensitive to this. If they know what's being grown in Cambodia and what's flooding the markets and has a low price, they will buy that. And because they also have a very long-term relationship with all of the sellers, they know which ones are selling Vietnamese produce and which ones are selling Cambodian produce. And if they're not sure, they will ask. Now, whether or not the vegetable seller is lying or not, we'll never know. But I have to take them at their face value. And I have to trust that the soup pot owner also knows how to judge whether or not those vegetables are seasonal, or whether or not that person is lying to them. And as a result, you can get a pretty accurate idea of whether or not it's a local vegetable or not.
Yeah. Two questions. Who are the patrons? Are they women, men, where they come from? And then, are they sensitive to pesticides when they buy something? They know whether it's full of pesticides or not?
Yeah, this is to answer your first question. There was around 62% men that I interviewed, and that's roughly corresponding to the demographic of people who eat in restaurants. And the reason that it's over 50% is simply because more men work outside the house. And if you look in my data, the amount, I also looked at not only what the job was of the person who I interviewed, but also the job of his or her partner, so that I know if he is housewife at home or if his wife is working in a factory or somewhere else. And housewives corresponded to around 25% of the group, and that's about half of the difference between 50% and 62% of the males who are going to these places. And I think that corresponds pretty well. It's just more people going outside, and as you know, or you might know in Cambodia, there always has to be somebody in the house. So it's very hard for people to go out as an entire family. But then if you also look, there's some factors that will change this, such as to go. Maybe the man will come and buy it, but he's bringing it back to his wife, and his wife cooked rice and something else in addition to what they already have. So to-go food is also an important factor here, but that's very hard for me to follow the person home and find out what's going on in their house. The issue of environment and ecology and food safety, I really wanted to study this, but in this particular context, it's very difficult because I'm very much experiencing the vegetable market from the perspective of the soup pot owner. And the soup pot owner is of course trying to get more Khmer produce on the idea that there's less pesticides. But whether or not there is or not in the Khmer versus the Vietnamese, it's not clear. But for sure, even if the price is slightly higher for the Khmer vegetables, they usually are demanded more, precisely for this reason. They think Khmer vegetables are higher quality and have less chemicals on them. Everyone wants to have that, but very often they simply need bell peppers for their food that they're going to make, and they will buy the Vietnamese one, they have no choice. But in general, they are trying to do that, but they don't have any transparent tools to accomplish that, sadly.
Okay. Two questions. One is, can you recommend one soup pot restaurant in Phnom Penh that is like your favorite? And two, in terms of hygienics, I think that's probably the number one concern that I have about going to either of these places. So I'm wondering if you, how often you got sick, and also what kind of hygienic measures, did you look at what they actually do? How do they clean the dishes? How do they clean whatever?
There are definitely some indicators that you can use to determine whether or not your risk is going to be relatively high or low when you walk into a place. So yeah, you can look, first of all, what is their system for cleaning dishes, if it is visible in the shop. In some places it's very visible, some places they take it in the back and it's not visible. But I'd say the best thing you can do is to go to a soup pot restaurant shortly after the food has been cooked. Because that means it's been sitting less time, less flies have been on it, less handling of the food by people. It's not unusual, for example, in the soup pot restaurant, for other customers to come in and look at the grilled fish and just touch every grilled fish to pick out the one they want. So by the time you get there an hour later, those fish have been touched by 20 people. So if you come right away, you'll be the first one to touch those fish.
You basically have to go in the morning?
Yeah, well, for lunch you have to go there at 11:15, 11:30, and for breakfast, yeah, you could be there at 6:30. That would be the best way. I also recommend a Cambodian breakfast, like the chicken one. You should go in the morning because they cook it there and it's warm. If you wait until later, it's just warm rice with cold meat. So I think if you bring in eating at a soup pot restaurant as a routine thing, and you go at the right time, you will rarely ever get sick. I did a whole research project on soup pot restaurants. You can imagine how many times I ate in the soup pot restaurant, and I ate in all sorts of restaurants, really poor ones, really slightly nicer looking ones, different parts of the city. And I would say in the whole year, maybe I can track one time that I got sick to a soup pot restaurant. So that's pretty good. I'd say that's in the 95% category. But you should also watch out for your own hygiene. But as for where you should go to eat, you can talk to me afterwards. I want to market anybody's soup pot restaurant. Any other questions?
Yes, what about Lu Meng restaurant? I'm not sure where is it?
Lu Meng is Malise restaurant. Yeah, so you have to have, about $10 in your pocket. No, as I said, the important thing with Malise is not necessarily to eat there, but just go in, order a Coca-Cola, and flip through the menu. The menu is really the best sort of museum of my cuisine that you can find. And he also lists all the ingredients that go in, unlike all the other cookbooks, which they will not be as clear about the quality of food, where it comes from. Lu Meng will say like this smoked fish comes from this area and it is this type of fish. And the recipe book will just say put smoked fish in. So you'll really get a very precise sense from him. But yeah, I think you can also just go to some of the other slightly more well-known restaurants to get a larger range of food. But soup pot restaurants, if you just pick one and you go there consistently, that's the best way to be introduced to Khmer food, because the owner will will give you the diversity day by day. She doesn't want to cook the same food, he or she, and probably within a month you will try a very large quantity of Khmer cuisine. Is there another question? Yes?
Yeah, I don't know your work as a researcher, so I just wanted to ask you, how did you come to this question about the national cuisine? And what kind of steps did your research?
My previous research was actually about ecological agriculture. So I was looking on the supply side, how farmers are now dealing with the market disruptions, but also the new demand for lower pesticide, lower chemical agriculture. But I also looked at heritage foods. I looked at things like palm products and traditional medicine to try and see what parts of the national patrimony, cultural heritage of Cambodia can somehow be protected. And of course, food is just such a charismatic topic. If you're going to look at, kampot pepper or, sour palm juice or something more famous in Cambodia, then food is a pretty logical next step. But it was nice for me in this case to be able to move from the supply side, where I worked with farmers for a number of years, and come to the interface between the countryside and the city. I still actually do a little bit of work in the countryside, but now mostly markets here and restaurants.
I think we're not going to take any more questions because we're already a bit late, but I'd like you to say thank you to Art. And maybe you could just briefly describe what kind of food we're going to have tonight.
Okay, so tonight we've got 4 dishes, and all of them they are not really in the top 5, but some of them are in the top 10 of things that might be ordered at a to-order restaurant. One is made from the fermented fish paste, brahok, and it's kind of mixed in a kind of curry way with chilies. It's red color now, or reddish color. It's very hygienic. It's been cooked a lot, and you eat it with vegetables that have been washed very well, lovingly by our staff. We're also going to have a very classic food called some lapa, which is basically the definition is defined very much by the person who makes it, but it always includes something like moringa leaf and has a very smoky flavor. This one will have topeam in it, which is my person.
Bamboo shoots.
Bamboo shoots, yeah. But the big one, big bamboo shoots. We're also going to have a noodle dish, a fried noodle dish that will be made with chicken. And these are rice noodles and vegetables. And it has a sauce on it that is fairly typical for Cambodia, based on fish sauce and garlic and chili. And that's just really refreshing to eat. What's the last one? Oh, we're gonna have some kind of fried food. Okay. Oh yeah, we're having a duck, chakadao. Chakadao is made with holy basil, and it's a little bit spicy, and with peanuts and holy basil. It's really excellent. And that one's made with duck, but and it should be also. It's one of the few. You always make this food with stronger tasting meats like duck or beef. So I think those are the 4 dishes. On the drink side, I mentioned it before, we're going to have sour palm beer. You'll find it in the green bottles that say Khmer on them. It's an alcoholic beverage made from palm sap, which is very local to this area. And actually the producer is here with us tonight. Hello, Riese. And he has a factory producing this, so it's kind of the first steps in terms of the modernization, packaging, advancement of a traditional product to make it accessible for urban areas. And we will have 3 different kinds of juice, all from Cambodian orchards here. Mango juice with pulp in it, guava juice, and tamarind juice. These are made by a Cambodian who studied in the former Soviet Union in East Berlin and got a food science degree now. He's trying to make Cambodian fruit juices a bit more popular. So keep an eye out. There's Coke and there's, you know, Angkor beer, but try something new. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much.